Today I'm speaking with Cathy Domoney. She has had over 20 years of experience transforming children's and families' lives through counseling, through being a teacher, through serving on school boards. And today we're going to be talking about how to handle bullying of your children, how to handle social media, and anything else. So if you're a parent or a grandparent who has children in your life, this is a really important podcast to listen to. So enjoy. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast for this week. This week, we are going to be talking about a subject which, if you have been following me for some time, you know I'm exceptionally passionate about, and that is children, this next generation, and helping them to navigate a world that we could not even have imagined would exist when we were kids. So I have my very good friend here, Cathy Domoney. Cathy's coming in from us. She has an English accent, but she lives in Australia.
Yes.
So don't let that fool you.
Absolutely, yes. A woman of many countries.
That's right. Cathy and I are good friends, and we both really share this immense passion. What I love about Cathy is that, she is the mother of 5 children, and some special needs kids as well. So, you have like a hands-on, in the moment, knowing what's going on, a situation when it comes to children, not just your own, but what's happening, in the world today. So I just thought this was a really important conversation that we want to bring to, anyone who's listening to the podcast who has influence over, whether it's your children, your grandchildren, to really help them, to give them the tools. I think the first question I want to ask you, Cathy, is what do you think is, and I know that there's a number of them, but some of the biggest issues or the biggest challenges that, kids need to navigate these days, that they're having trouble with?
Well, there's a multitude of issues, as we know. And I have to say, I'm so grateful that I never had to navigate through them at their age. I mean, the things that I see my children having to navigate through is intense. There is no escape unless you are so aware and you're trying to give those guidelines and safety boundaries around all of the social media and the technology and all of these things that have in some ways beautifully enhanced our lives and increased connectivity and all of those sorts of things, and in some places can make you feel more inclusive because you can reach out and connect with like-minded people across the world, which is amazing. But my daughter, for example, she's 20 now, but when she was about 15, she was the subject of cyberbullying. And we had and still have this amazing connection where no conversation is off the table. So they can come to me if they've made mistakes, they can come to me with anything, and we will find a solution together. So it's not a guilt, shame, blame situation. It's oh, isn't this curious? Okay, well, that's an interesting experience. How can we move through that so that they have the space and the oxygen to breathe and grow and make mistakes and find their way? And so because of that sort of environment that we've created at home, she was able to bring her phone to me and show me just the barrage of essays of character assassinations on her. And I went into fight, flight, freeze. And I was only receiving it secondary, to her. And it was really quite disturbing and quite upsetting. And as I said, it really threw my nervous system into chaos because it was not nice to be in your safe environment receiving such unsafe messages and attacks. We were able to talk through it together. And I think a key point that we have sort of navigated as a family is not to villainize the other person.
Right.
Because it gives them a lot of power, number one. And also to villainize the other person, it also makes you feel like a victim. Right. And sort of powerless as well. And so what we've managed to do is sit down and have some really sort of sometimes uncomfortable conversations, digging into what must be going on in that person's life for them to be behaving nicely towards you in person, but then, giving you all these character assassinations at night. And to do that was, we were able to humanize the other side of the screen
Right.
and understand that there was something going on that we obviously weren't aware of, for them to be sharing their pain in such inappropriate ways.
Right.
And, my kids found that to be quite empowering. Not to say they weren't hurt, not to say it wasn't difficult for them to navigate through, but to understand that this was a really marked reflection of the other person's journey, and not a reflection on their own character, like they had done nothing, wasn't anything deficient within themselves.
Right. Yeah.
And with my kids, they have got different abilities, all of them, and so sometimes the world aren't quite ready for them yet. And it's been really, really important for us as a family to highlight all of their quirkiness as the reasons why they're successful, rather than try and hide them from the world. And help them understand that not everybody's quite ready to receive their amazing quirkiness, and that's okay. But to really fill them with a genuine self-love, not an arrogance, just a genuine self-appreciation and understanding of themselves, has sort of allowed them to become quite bulletproof to attacks from others, because although they may sting temporarily, they're able to see that wider picture and navigate through it with their power intact, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. All right. So that sounds, I mean, that was dense. There was a lot of things that you kind of covered in that short time there. But my question for you is, how did you know to do that? Like how, like, as a parent, sometimes it's challenging, and especially, your children know how to push your buttons like nobody else.
Yes.
So how do you say, how do you manage your reaction when something is, when you, like you said, you turn into a mama bear. If someone's saying that about you, kid, you want to rip that other kid's head off. Like that is your, an internal thought. So how did you get to a place where you could be so grounded and have choice over the way that you respond when these different situations come up?
Yeah, well, it's not for the faint-hearted. It is not easy. And I think for me, in my parenting journey, I always knew my kids were a bit different, but I couldn't quite put my finger on what it was. And when they got their diagnoses, I thought to myself, in my current being, I'm not going to cut it.
Right.
I'm not going to be the mother that they deserve. I'm going to have to dissolve a lot of my childhood stuff in order to hold a big enough space for them. I mean, in England, we glide like swans on the water while our feet are going madly under the water. We don't share that our feet are going madly under the water. And so I had to really dissolve a lot of my the social constructs that I'd inherited in my childhood in order to show up and be the parent, the supportive advocate that I needed to be for my kids. And I think so that it's taken a lot of inner work. And I was talking to someone the other day about, because my kids have been bullied, my kids have been hospitalized through bullying. Okay, this is a really real experience that we have had to encounter again and again as a family. And, as you said, I am fiercely in love with my kids, and I'm fiercely their advocate. And I have the full range of human emotions when they are hurt. Okay, so I go deep into anger and vengefulness and, outrage and all of the things. But the thing that I have practiced, and I think it's key, is the pause, right? So we don't react from that heightened state of being. We actually sit in ourselves and we work through those big emotions. We don't deny them. They are part of our experience. Like, I think people try to compartmentalize their experience into, these are positive feelings, these are negative feelings. All feelings are there to serve a purpose, right? This is for me to say, hey, my primal programming has come out. Who's hurt my baby? I've got a spear. Do you know what I mean? Like, but then we work through that and we keep ourselves to ourselves, and we reach that point where we can be centered and intelligent again. So our hippocampus starts working, and we're not in fight, flight, freeze anymore. and we can think about this logically and understand that the person on the other side is a person. And then what I do certainly is I try to get myself to a point where I think, what if I really loved the person on the other side of this? What if I really deeply cared for this person? What if they were my child, And then respond from that place where, sure, you can express boundaries and standards and discipline and all of those things, but from a loving place. And we've done this many times with our kids when they have been hospitalized and bullied, and relentlessly, quite honestly, and very difficult at times to navigate through it. But we got to a place where we reached out to the other side lovingly and said, hey, what's going on in your life? Is there any way we can support you? How can we all be part of this solution? And every time we've done that, it's not easy. It's not easy to get to that point. But every time we've done it, it's been life-changing for everybody involved. Because, for example, the school and the family were alerted to the fact that the other person on the other side was struggling in some way that they may not have been consciously aware of, because they may be under their own stresses. And so it's highlighted the other person. And did my children and those children become friends? No, they didn't. But they became coexisting in a really caring, conscious way, which was quite miraculous from the place that they started, which was deep conflict.
Right. And so how responsive has the other parties been over the years? Surely there's some that are just like, what is the regular response when you reach out like that?
Well, I do write a letter. That's my thing, because I am a writer at heart. And so I write the other person a letter as if they were someone I deeply cared for.
Right.
And so it's not a hateful letter, it's a, hey, this was not okay. And you have not just hurt one child, you've hurt a whole family here. I want you to understand that. But at the same time, you have apologized and you've admitted to doing it. And that's a really mature thing to do, and all the things. But then just saying, we can see that you have some pain of some kind. How can we help you? And each time it's been received, I've given it to the school to share with whichever children. I mean, some of the children, I wouldn't even know what they looked like.
Right.
It's not relevant. It's not relevant. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so they've shared it with the kids. And every single time that we've experienced this, the children have got very emotional and shared that they're really anxious or really worried, or something's happening in their lives to have elevated them in this way. And of course, they're sharing their pain in the most inappropriate ways. So we have found it to be a very successful strategy of how to deal with these incredibly uncomfortable, sometimes excruciatingly so, situations. And I feel like everybody just wants to be seen and heard, and they want to feel like they belong, and they want to feel connected.
Yeah.
And often it's the time when they are the least desirable to be connected with that they desperately need that connection.
Absolutely. And I wonder, did this have any effect on like school policy? Like if this happened in a couple of schools, they've gone, oh, we didn't think about it this way. Because I'm sure that in these situations, it's a very knee-jerk, or it's an old patterned way of responding to it, going, right, black and white, you bullied, you're in the wrong, you have to be punished, without even sitting down and having the inquiry as to, well, what's going on with you? Did things change within the school? Did you notice?
Well, we have been to a few schools because, as you know, we're immigrants, so we've traveled around a little bit. But I know that school counselors have reached out to me asking if they can use my letter as an example in classes. Just, I think it's like a bridge between the two sides. And I mean, I've got a very unique perspective because I've been the teacher, I've been the parent, I've been the counselor, I've been on the School of Governors, the governing board. Yeah. And so I've really been able to see this from every single angle. And, especially when I was teaching in a school that had a lot of difficult times, that the families faced a lot in that environment in where we were. I found that people just needed support. They just needed support. And the times that I've, as a teacher, have navigated through these situations where bullying was involved, and each side was so angry and bitter towards the other side. And I just thought, but do you know what? You're both gorgeous families. If only I could share with you what's going on in each other's lives, you would absolutely link arms and support each other. But of course, because of confidentiality, I wasn't able to share those pieces of information. And so it's really down to the parents to be brave enough to connect on that level. And it's vulnerable. You don't know how you're going to be received. You know, when I've reached out, because I mean, my little girl, as you know, the firecracker, she's just started school, but when she started kindy and nobody knew her, and she is quirky and she is different, and she is, if we don't handle it in the correct way, she's going to be a target, because she is very different, Nat. You know that. You've seen her in action. And so I wrote a letter to the parents just saying, hey guys, you know, my name's Taya. This is how I express joy. I haven't found my words yet. Sometimes I can be very loud. I don't mean to scare anybody. It's just that I'm so happy it bubbles out of my body. And I wrote this so that the other families who are meeting her for the first time didn't look at her and say, wow, she's weird. They'll go, oh, that's Taya. This is how she expresses joy. She must be happy. And I'll tell you something. I'm pretty brave as a person. But when I sent that letter, I felt physically sick. Sick to my stomach. I was shaking. I was so scared, because there's that fine line between trying to be a bridge between the world and your child, but also not creating the opportunity for them to label your child and disregard them. Right. You know, and it's really, really hard. But I found that to be very successful, and that the community just understood her to a level they wouldn't have if I hadn't shared that information. And again, the professionals like the OTs and the speechies and the well-being people, they said, oh, can we share your letter? Can we share your letter with other parents? Because this has been so successful. And I said, yes, you can, but understand it's really, really scary to share this letter. Do you know what I mean? So don't assume every parent is going to be able to do that, because you want to protect your baby above all else. And to be vulnerable in this way is terrifying.
Yeah, I know. And I'm just imagining the transformation that you personally went through, because, you know, I know about the English culture. You know, it's a stiff upper lip, and no one ever talks about anything. I've got some really hilarious stories, which I really can't share on the podcast, about, you know, English friends of mine, about, you know, things that would happen with their family, something that happened that was like really noticeable. Like, you know, one I can probably share is like this family, the dad used to pass wind, you know, when they were sitting down watching TV, but instead of, you know, acknowledging it, that it was, you know, a fart, he would send everyone to go and wash their feet. Because, you know, they're so English. It was just a typical example.
I love that so much. Oh my goodness.
So you've gone from that kind of a culture to, no, I need to lean into this and face this head on and have the courage to step into it. Like, that's quite the transformation, darling.
Thank you. Yes. And of course, the motivation is I want to be the best parent I can be to my kids, because they deserve that. And so any fears that I had, and I did have fears, and it hasn't been easy. I mean, I've, as you know, I'm the person that I will always dig into what's uncomfortable. And, you know, I'll put a stick in there, I'll poke around, and then I'll rub some salt in. Do you know what I mean? I'm like, what is this? This is holding me back from being a next level of, you know, successful. So I would always look into that. I listen, I learn, I'm open to receiving, not just from experts out there, because I listen to a lot of podcasts, I read a lot of books, you know, I'm always ready to learn, but listening to my kids. Yeah. Listening to my children's experience is so important. And then I learn how I need to be fluid in my approach, how I need to, where I need to adjust, where I need to learn more, you know, because they're navigating a world that I've never navigated. So I have to be open to being educated by them and guided by them, you know. Right. And I think there's a bit of a fear around that, because the old paradigm of parenting was, do as I say, I know the answers, I you know, I'll keep you safe. And that's the sort of urge that we have as parents. But the times are changing. Like, we need to sort of say, okay, I've never navigated through this before. Explain to me what's happening. How are you feeling about that? What are you thinking is the way forward? Do you know what I mean? So that we can then start to have these rich conversations. And the earlier we start doing this with our kids and involving them in the process and taking their opinions and ideas seriously. I mean, don't get me wrong. My 15-year-old came to me and said, I've been invited to a party in the middle of nowhere in a barn. There's going to be 18-year-old guys there. There's going to be drink. There's going to be, I don't know whether there would be drugs there. Can I go? And I'm like, and at the time, it was super, super important that she'd been invited because she was a bit of an outcast at school, because she was a deep thinker and she wasn't into smoking and she wasn't into drinking and all of those things. So she was struggling to fit in. And so I knew that this meant everything to her. So my inner parents going, ding, 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 not a chance in hell.
Yeah, hell no.
Yeah. But honoring her experience, excuse me, sorry.
Yeah, and being able to like look at both sides of that. I mean, it takes a gift, darling. Yeah.
Well, it's understanding that she was desperate to go. I mean, to us as adults, it's just a party. To her, it was everything. And so we didn't put our context on it. We put her context on it. And I said, I know this is really important to you. I'm going to take it to Dad. We're going to talk about it seriously. We're going to get back to you with a decision. And I spoke to Ian and he said, no. And I said, I know. But I said, we needed to talk about it. And then, I went back to her and we sat her down and she looked at me and she said, the answer's no, isn't it? And I said, I'm so sorry. I said, we cannot support you in going. There is too much at play. There's too many things that will go wrong. I know it's not going to be supervised. I cannot, as in all good conscience, as your parent and your guide, send you to be in that situation. And so although she was really upset about it, she was able to receive that and understand the reasons. We weren't just saying no to be, difficult.
No, because I said so. Yeah.
Yeah. We were saying no because it really wasn't the right thing to do. But interestingly, now she's 20 and an adult and living her life and all the things, she reflects back and says, I'm so glad, Mum, that you said no on those occasions. But I still felt like I was seen and heard, and I was still a bit salty about the no, but I was able to live with it. And I think this is the thing, is the more we involve them in things like this, the more when they leave us, we're confident that they can work through these things and make the right decision, not necessarily the decision that they want to make, but the right decision.
So what I hear is that if you're, with your kids or your grandkids, that you want to really approach conversations with them, treating them like an equal, making sure that they're seen and heard, go in with curiosity, asking questions. Like you said, it's a world that we never had to navigate. So, finding out what their experience is and listening to them and reflecting back on that. Now, the other thing I'd really love to get your feedback on is social media. So, well, you've already described like the worst case scenario of what can happen with our kids online. So what's your advice to parents and grandparents out there who are, navigating that whole thing with their children?
Well, it's huge, and it can't be underestimated, the impact it's having on our young minds. For sure. And their nervous systems, like even at a biological, physical level, this is elevating them in all ways. So we really need to take it seriously. And how we've handled it as a family, and what I coach families to do and in my communities, is to listen with no guilt, shame, blame. So my kids have experimented with social media, experimented with the internet. There's so much out there now, and it's really difficult to navigate as a parent, because you don't want to say you're never going on it, because that's how they connect to the world. But you're also like, oh, I don't understand all of it. So you're trying to study up all the time and figure out what's safe, what's not safe. And so you try and put some really hard guidelines around, this is how we are going to use it. This is almost our user agreement. If you violate any of those user agreements, we need to rethink it. But we had a situation with our daughter when she was around 15 again. And she had, done something, been exposed to things and whatever that weren't in our code of conduct. and of course had sort of been doing it under the radar. And then she'd come to me, and because she didn't feel good about herself because she knew she wasn't supposed to be doing it. She knew we were trying to protect her and all those things. And she came and she sort of was really distressed about it. And we talked it through. And I said, look, I've never dealt with this before. Leave it with me. I need to think through this. And she was following me around. I went, seriously, give me some space. I need to think through this.
I need more than a minute.
Yeah. And, you know, I thought, okay, this is what's happened. It's been an experience. She's really learned something from this. She's obviously distressed about it. Job done. Like it's been managed without me even intervening. And so I sort of went back to her and said, well, don't do that again. And she went, is that it? And I said, yeah. And then she started crying because we hadn't punished her. I said, you don't need to be punished because, you know, number one, that doesn't work. And number two, you've learned so much from this experience. I said, take it and use it as your rocket fuel to success. So I think, you know, it's really important that we establish with our kids an environment where they can come and talk to us about anything. And we as parents and grandparents need to be careful about what it is we're focusing on in that conversation.
Yeah.
So like, for example, there was a time when my daughter, again, she's a great kid, by the way. This is just, I don't know why she's coming up as the examples, but this is what's happened. And she was very, very lonely because of the school situation. And she was talking to somebody over the other side of the world. And it was really important to her. It was a lifeline at that point. But I did feel a little bit cautious. Is this other person who they say they are?
Right.
Because this is a concern that we have as parents is, you know, is it genuine? Is it real? And so I went in and I said to her, darling, I really like to check your messages. And she was mortified, absolutely mortified. And I'm very much of the thing, I wouldn't do it without them knowing, even if they're uncomfortable and angry with me. We're very open and honest about things. And anyway, I went through the messages, and there was swearing in the messages, and there were all sorts of things in the messages. That's not what I was looking at.
Right.
That was private. They didn't think anybody was going to read it. And that's not what I was looking for. I was looking for, is this a genuine 15-year-old kid on the other side of the world? So I looked at the conversations and I was satisfied by the conversations. Yes, this person was who they were saying they were, and I'd investigated them. And I never said anything about the content of the messages.
Right.
Because that's not what I was looking at.
Yeah.
And so I think it's easy to fall into the trap of going, hey, you've sworn in this message. You've said this, you've said that. That was none of my business. I wasn't trying to invade all of their privacy. She was mortified that I was looking at it. I just wanted to make sure she was safe.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it's really important that when we're having conversations with our kids, we don't fall into that traditional parenting role as well. This was wrong, and that you shouldn't have done that, and this, blah, blah. Just listen and go, okay, what's my intention here? My intention is for them to learn through this experience, or my intention is to, shore up their safety or whatever it is. And the other thing that we've done that's been really successful is to fill our kids with a genuine self-appreciation, self-love, because then people can say stuff to them, and yeah, it might sting for a minute, but it generally bounces off them because they know that to be not true.
Right. They've got a very strong sense of self.
Yes.
And they like who they are.
Yes. And that's not easy either.
No.
It really
especially
isn't.
now, because it is actually part of a child's development, you know, our sense of belonging. And we go through a whole period where our sense of worth is our comparison to others, or how we perceive other people are perceiving us. And so, you know, we have this unreal, exaggerated environment online, which is social media. And there's too much weight, there's too much meaning given to the likes and the comments and the everything else, and not really understanding the construct in which it's put in. So, you know, I think everyone has a different opinion on, you know, I saw a little clip of Jennifer Garner, you know, the actress, and because her girls are not on social media. And in the interview, they go, how did you get away with that? How were you able to? She goes, well, I told them as soon as I could produce an article that said that social media was positive. Until then, they weren't allowed on there. So I'm like, okay. I mean, that's one way to do it, and everyone has their different ways. But what I love about your approach and my approach is that, okay, social media exists. There's no. I don't believe that you should say, like, don't go on there. But when you ready your child and they have strong self-worth, they have a high self-esteem, they love themselves, they know who they are, they know what their values are, and they know what their standards are, then something like social media is not the smoking gun that it needs to be. It's actually a place that they understand the context of it, rather than putting extra meaning as to what's actually going on.
It's so important to educate them, rather than, from my perspective, rather than ban them completely, which I respect everybody's approach.
Yeah.
But it's really important to educate them on how to use social media, because whether we like it or not, it's part of our lives generally. And I've taught a class, it's like a leadership class to teenagers. And these sorts of things, these are the conversations we have in this collective of these amazing young minds. And one of the sessions that I do is unpacking social media and looking behind what's happening and investigating a post and finding it to be false, and looking at airbrushing and looking at all of these things. And, I've had kids go through my programs and they've stopped self-harming. They've come off antidepressants. They've been pre-suicidal, and suddenly they've embraced life, they've embraced themselves. And all I do, in all honesty, is connect them deeply and powerfully to themselves.
Right.
And disrupt the pattern of them comparing themselves to something that's not real. And then once we amplify all of the gorgeous talents and skills innate within them, they feel good about themselves.
Yeah.
They stand taller. They understand that they have value and worth that's not tied to social media, that's not tied to academic attainment. They are worthy just by being them. And the more that they can be them, the more they can impact the world in positive ways and make connections. And that's what we're all looking for, is belonging and connection. But we need to belong to ourselves first.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, darling, you do such great work. And I know, like, for 20 years, you've been working with families and with kids, and you do incredible work, and an amazing mother. You are a wealth of information. So where can people find you? And I know that you have a gift for our listeners as well today. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So, sorry, I thought I muted myself on that cough. So I apologize to the audience for that lovely share. That was a little extra bonus for you. Sorry about that. Yes. So I was very, very interested in, and I always have been, even when I was teaching, my passion was, who are the kids? What are their dreams? What are their skills? What are their talents? Let's plug into that and amplify it. And that's when the academics actually kicked in, when they really understood who they were and what they had to offer the world. So that's my passion. And then as I've gone on, I've written my children's books, which are the, starting point to meaningful conversations with your kids and all of those sorts of things. I'm really, really interested to get to the core of who people are. And so I'm interested in who they are, not what their grades are. Even as a background in teaching, I've always been interested in who the child is. And so I started digging into some of the greatest leaders of our time. Let's look at their characteristics, and it's things like honor, integrity, kindness is so important, in honesty, being fair, being just, being inclusive. These are all of the marks of leadership. And so I've created this Raising Leaders blueprint because I really want every single young person to really connect to their value and worth. And that is not connected always to grades on paper. And we really need to acknowledge that. And so the document is quite comprehensive. And it's basically saying, this is an amazing leader in history. Honor was really important to this leader. This is what honor is. And this is what it practically looks like in the house day to day.
Right.
Because it's all very well being academic and saying, hey, we need to be honorable. Okay, what does that look like for a teenager? What does that look like for a kid to be honorable? What does that actually look like in a real life situation? So it's this very comprehensive guide with a masterclass, actually, where I talk into the points. And I just want, my mission is to empower every parent so that they can empower their child to the next level. And you know what I'm getting is I have a lot of conversations, because I get on with everybody, and I have,
can't imagine that.
one of my best friends is 70. Right. She's amazing. And you know, it's about those grandparents are still empowering their children to empower their grandchildren. Yeah. So this, you know, this parenting thing never ends. It doesn't matter that your kid's 45 and got, you know, I mean, it's so funny when my parents came to stay from England, I went out for the night and they said, what time are you going to be home? Well, drive safely, text me when you get. And I'm like, Mum, I've lived out of my house for like, you know, I'm 43, but you know, it never stops, that parenting. So it's a beautiful guide. There's a masterclass and there's lots of other free gifts as well, because I'm very passionate about empowering everybody. They've been navigating through so much in the last few years. A lot of people have elevated nervous systems, and they really need some safe place to land where they can feel safe, they can share without guilt, shame, blame, and they can be supported.
Yeah. So guys, I encourage you to go to cathydomoney.com/welcome. I'm going to make sure that the URL and that link is in the show notes, so you can click on that and go straight through to Cathy's website. And, you know, like I said, she's mentioning she has books and things as well, how to, you know, model those conversations, how to have those conversations with your children. She is just, as you probably have gathered from this short time that we've been together, she's just a legend. And so thank you so much for your time, darling. It's been a fantastic conversation. And I encourage anyone who's listening to this podcast, if you know anyone who has children or has challenges, you know, I mean, who doesn't as a parent, I encourage you to share the podcast so that they can also get access to this information. So thank you, darling. It's been awesome talking with you today.
Thank you for having me, gorgeous.
Thanks, darling.